It is Monday, April 27th, 2026, and I'm going to call to order the City of Burlington's Board of Finance meeting at 5:04 p.m. Our first item is the agenda. Is there a motion on the agenda?
Move to adopt the agenda.
By Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Thank you. Any discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. On to item 2 is our public forum. It's a practice of Board of Finance to first go to members of the public in the room and then online, see who is here to address the board. Is anyone here in the room? Please come up. Come up, Andrea. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening. You all got at least 5 minutes in that lovely air today. My name is Andrea Beats. I'm the Executive Director of Community Senior Center. I'm here to both hear what's going on with budget development in the city, and also I have talked with members of CDNR that the Heineberg really needs a little bit more money this year, and I know that's a big ask, but we are providing services. We're having about a dozen new people every month join center. We've moved from 25 seats at lunch to 30 to 35. At our board meeting last week, we talked about the need to expand our hours into Fridays because the building will explode if we try to schedule another event inside it. Our need is about $38,000 in order to provide the level of services that we're providing now, which is serving about 500 older adults annually. And I will provide you at City Council with some written information. But I just want to put that out there into the process. We are working very hard. Our total budget is barely tapping $200,000. And we do a lot with that little. So, thank you.
Yeah. Who else in the room here to address the Board of Finance? The staff and councilors, I'm assuming not, so we'll go online. And I see former City Councilor Sharon Busher. Good evening or afternoon, Sharon.
Hi, good evening. It's so beautiful outside. I wish you had like a place to go and meet outside, but you don't. Well, you have City Hall Park, but you wouldn't, it wouldn't work really well. Anyways, the reason I'm speaking tonight is, first of all, the finance group that put together the presentation that Catherine's going to present, you know, it's very clear, and I'm so appreciative as a resident to have this tracking. So that I just want to make everyone know how valuable it is for those of us who aren't, you know, immersed in things. Although, you know, I'm a junkie, but anyways, it's wonderful. But I did have a request. You did show in one of the slides the impact, the tax increase from 2023 to 2027 for an average home of $350 or whatever $1,000, and that's about $710 increase over those 4 years. It would be really helpful for me also to have a place where you can also find how the user fees have increased, like for the utilities, for water, for wastewater, for BED, also like the solid waste tax. Because that's the cumulative effect on people. And I really feel like that is something that I want city government and the city councilors to be aware of, not only the residents, I think we all know, but I think that it's very valuable to have that. So the combined impact. And so that's my request to you as you go forward. And it looks like, my last statement is, it looks like you, with a lot of hard work, are getting closer to bridging the gap between what we want to fund and what we have for monies to fund the budget, FY27 budget. And I know that's reflective of a ton of work. So anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. anyone else online who would like to address the Board of Finance? You can raise your Zoom hand if so. Okay, seeing no one else, I will close public forum and we'll move on to our third item, the consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda? Moved by Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Travers, I think it was. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. On to item 4, our deliberative agenda. We have 2 deliberative items for an informational item. So item 4.1 is our first item. It's a reclassification request from our CEDO department. Director, Government Board, Director, and assistants who are here. Welcome, and interim CEDO director for the moment. Welcome, both of you. Thank you.
I'll let interim director.
Yeah.
Right?
Good evening, Will Colville, interim CEDO director. We are here for a reclass for a position that really took on a lot of new work, roles, responsibilities, really required new expertise, and this was in response to the reduction in force and a couple new city policies that added a little bit of work to the CEDO plate. So we are looking to retitle and reclass the position from a grade 15 to a grade 18 to reflect this additional work this employee took on. Happy to answer any questions that you may have or elaborate on any of the increased workload for the employee.
I will also note this, this reclass is a result of the ModGov restructuring, and in the memo, we note that this is the only reclass we expect to come out of CEDO. We have approximately 430,000 in savings from the ModGov impacts on CEDO. And this reclass is 7,000, 3,500 of which is covered by a grant. So it's a 3,500 increase to the general fund, which is offset by the 430,000.
Thank you. So let's open it up for questions or comments from the board. Councilor Capps.
Yeah. Just to confirm, this is my understanding from the memo, the promotion here, reclassification is only forward looking, this doesn't include any retroactive.
Correct.
Date time looking. I know that's something that myself and Councilor Barlow have raised. Just want to
Yes.
acknowledge gratitude for that. I anticipate and have a lot of gratitude as well for the individual that's been work outside.
Well, this individual has been given the 5% increase for temporarily holding excess and has been receiving that.
Okay.
This time.
And this is partly why we didn't wait until the next fiscal year, because they had been doing this work, and so the longer we waited, the more we might have to look back and pay them for previous work done.
Understood. Okay. Well, I just wanted to acknowledge that and understood that the 5% is what's on their response, but also wanted to acknowledge the responsiveness to the feedback that you've heard about the retro pay. And that I think that this is the exact right way to support. Yeah. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilor Carpenter?
I just want to concur with Councilor Travers, and this is probably more to you, that going forward, I hope that when we see the budgets from the department heads, they have factored in whatever they think they have to do or reorg as harder, tightening of their belts. So that, I don't think that's an issue. And this is more for Karen, as we can do this offline. And I just had a couple questions about the org chart. I know you're gonna come another day. So it's like we're kind of missing planning and zoning staff.
Yes.
And so I don't.
For my budget presentation, which will be on Wednesday, I have a more applicable org chart.
Okay,
This was just to highlight where this position is, but yes, agreed, yeah.
Anything else? Or there is any question? Oh, Councilor Duties, I'm sorry.
Hey, hi all. I just want to acknowledge and appreciate the context that you led with around how you're thinking about this reclassification in the context of the budget. That was my main question, and appreciate that info.
Great, thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
I'll move the motion as it's placed on civic clerk.
Thank you, Counselor Carpenter. Is there a second? Second by Counselor Barlow. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
On to item 4.2, which is a purchase of vehicle installed with parking enforcement with Department of Public Works. There's a lot. I have too much on the table.
Becky Spritti, Division Director for Parking and Traffic. We are interested in purchasing a vehicle installed camera. We've talked with the team about this a bunch too. This technology is very similar to what we're using already. So right now, our parking service agents can go up to a vehicle and take a photo of the license plate with the phone. And the technology in the phone just translates the digits on the license plate into our software. So this is the same thing, it's just on a vehicle, so we're gonna be able to enforce faster. So I've included in here the purchase policy from late 2024 that we have been put into practice already. We noted that there hasn't been any interest in the data, no one asking for any of the data, which is good. So the request is for approximately $54,000. That amount will change slightly depending on when we actually purchase this. And that's for the camera plus the subscription for the next year until the end of our 5-year contract with Ames.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, questions or discussion before Councilor Carpenter?
Is this on the vehicle or in the vehicle?
It's on the vehicle, so it's mounted it's a camera mounted somewhere on the front of the vehicle. It is mounted on.
Councilor Barlow.
You'd mentioned that you didn't think the data would be misused by, I think, so is there an agreement we have with them that prevents them from saying the data in certain ways?
I'm not sure if we have an agreement with them already, but I have to ask Eric if we do. So we've spoken with them about, and it's up to us how long we keep it. So we're planning to offer a new permit option where you can pre-purchase a bunch of days in the parking garage at a discounted rate, a punch card, if you will. So with that, we have to keep that data for however long the punch card is. Let's say you buy 30 and it takes you 3 months to use those 30 days that you purchased. So we keep them for 90 days or something, and then all of that data will be deleted. We have an agreement or working on an agreement with the Ames program that we can delete whatever we want, however long we decide to delete that.
So the Ames technology, is it just, is it local storage? Do we store it in the cloud with them?
It is local storage, and I believe we keep that. So our office on Pine Street is CJIS certified, so everyone that works there is all CJIS certified, criminal justice information service. So I believe it's locally stored. I'm not a super IT person, but I think that's the right answer.
I assume this is the same data you're already collecting, you're just doing it manually.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Chip, do you mind just adding, I went on the tour a while ago now of the actual office that Jackie's mentioning. If you want to do, but maybe Chip can just talk about the intentionality around the limited access, both within actual personnel within the city and the public, but then also just the whole tension behind data privacy here. Elaborate a little bit more on that.
Sure, when it got transferred, parking services got transferred from police to DPW back in 2021 or something. We outfitted a room that is highly secure, it's badge only access. The only people who have access who have been trained, CJIS certified. There is no one else in the building who's allowed, other than those who are trained, as Jackie and I are. We have computer screens that can't be seen even from outside. And we follow the privacy policy that Assistant City Attorney Rama Krishnan developed for us about 2 years ago. And I have to say, the operation has worked very smoothly since then.
In particular, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a minute since we've had this conversation, Jacob, but there is no coordination even with UTP on the data. What this is really
That is
developed
correct.
in DPW, only certain information's even retained and looked at for when there's a outstanding ticket or something, right? And so, and there's a purge. So there's a lot of intentionality. I understand probably where the sentiment is coming from on the national level around data, license plate reader technology companies taking all that data, holding it. I've seen a lot of the mayors have this conversation around data and those who have standard contracts, not knowing that they're co-signing this data to be used elsewhere. And I think we have a lot of good protections in place already. And if anything, we're strengthening even on the local level, the real demarcation between parking services which is within DPW, separate from law enforcement, and already have those firewalls. Yeah, great. Thank you, Councilor Perlow. Further questions? Comments?
No, I was gonna make the motion. Other questions? See what there is. I'll,
right.
the motion is recommended on city clerk.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Seconded by Council Carpenter. Thank you. Further discussion or the vote?
I just have a question. I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit more on the revenue projections from this. I don't think it's $100,000. Over what period of time do you anticipate that we would be able to put that kind of revenue? I'll leave it there.
That's my projection for one fiscal year. So hopefully we can get this installed right around July 1 of this year, and that would be my projection. An easy way to think of it is currently we circulate downtown garage fully twice a day. With this car, we could do it 6 times a day. So according to city ordinance, we shall be able to ticket a car that does not pay every 2 hours. So realistically, we could go every 2 hours and write people tickets. I think we're missing a lot just because we move so quickly on foot. So that's just one example. We also plan to do this in residential neighborhoods, and a street could take 30 minutes to walk the whole thing and check every plate. This is going to take 3 minutes to drive and check every plate.
Okay.
It's just becoming more efficient, which leaves time to do other things or write more tickets as needed.
And the intention is to just use this at the moment in the garages, residential streets. Could it also be used on metered spots on
Yes.
downtown streets?
Yeah, it can be
Is that-
used everywhere.
Okay, and is it our intention to use it everywhere? or-
Yes.
One of the things we've talked about is really focusing in low density residential and in the garages first for a key reason that safety is paramount. The challenge is there are fewer places to pull over in the downtown area. Key distinguishing piece that we haven't talked about is that once we find that there's an unpaid stay, we need to get out and go through the same process we go through as if we were walking the street. So we take a picture of the front of the car, the back of the car. We, check for accessible hang tags, all the things. So we need to be able to pull the car over safely. So it really is kind of lends itself to the lower density and the garages first. We get that dialed in and can explore going further. We're only doing this on one car. Our intent really is to focus in those 2 spots first.
I think the last thing I'll say, and then I see that Councilor Beazer has his hand raised, is I appreciate the desire for us to enter the 21st century on this, and we'll be supportive of it. I think we also all know that Burlington is a community that appreciates over communication when changes are coming. This seems like it's going to be a change, right? If I'm someone who historically has parked in the downtown garage and has decided to take the gamble of parking there without a ticket and has operated under the assumption that, well, if I am going to get a ticket, at least it's only going to be one, right? The idea that I may be taking that same gamble moving forward and coming back later that evening and finding 5 tickets on my windshield as opposed to the one that I originally expected, that's going to be a pretty significant change to those that have engaged in that practice that they should not be doing, but I know a number of folks do. And then I think same for resident parking. I suspect that there's a number of streets, and we've seen this, for example, around some recent community events where there's been sort of these understandings of almost unwritten rules in terms of how folks can park there, or understanding that, well, a parking enforcement agent really isn't going to come down this one dead end street on a right, but maybe now it will, right? And so I do think over communication to garage users, over communication to residential parking permit holders to make sure that their guests know that the chances of getting caught are significantly increased here. I think will be helpful because I'm anticipating the correspondence that we're going to receive once this new technology is stood up.
Understood. We can certainly do that, communication.
Go to Councilor Deviser and then to Councilor Carpenter. Councilor Deviser?
Well, while I have DPW, I just have to say quickly, I was really, it just made my week. I got like this little notice on Grove Street about the speed bumps. And it's exactly, resident input that we talked about like a year ago, taken into account, and the notification, the outreach was really awesome. So thank you for that. And I think a lot of folks on that street are going to be excited to get that notice today. I'm going to be voting no, and it's, I guess honestly, I just kind of find it a little bit creepy. I am really concerned from a civil liberties perspective on, and I didn't raise this on the when we had a discussion around legislative priorities and using cameras for speed enforcement. I know that's sort of been like a discussion, at least at the Ward 1 MPA we've had sometimes. And I'm increasingly concerned, with sort of, I think we need to take a step back as a city and really evaluate moving forward, because I think this is increasingly going to happen. How we use newer technology, AI, what we're doing in the name of efficiency and maybe ease of workflow, and sort of the impact, maybe the intangible impact on, and very real sort of down the line civil liberty impact that these decisions can make. So I'm increasingly, maybe it's my own politics changing over time here, but concerned with that. And maybe it's okay if we just are not perfectly efficient with parking enforcement, to be honest. I don't see that as a major issue, and I don't know that I feel comfortable at this point going down that road. So I'll be voting no today.
Thank you, Councilor. Can you Deviser, Councilor Carpenter?
Two things. One, just raised by Councilor Newbeeser, just to repeat, this is the same information you're keeping manually, it's just not manual. I do think in terms of publicity, we really need to get more word out about Park Mobile. It's kind of in your face now, but surprisingly, people I know who should know better still don't use it. And there's no excuse for me now to suggest somebody not use it, and that's how you avoid, again, just one off topic, and I can talk offline with you, Jackie, observation about parking violations. It is very difficult in downtown Burlington to drop somebody off. So I encourage you to, and as now somebody who gets dropped off a lot, I encourage us to look at that a little harder about where's a safe spot to be dropped off. Not park, but long enough to step out of the car, get your walker, unlock the car, unload the person, and so I just asked that you think about that.
I think that's enough, actually.
Yes, we have vehicle loading zones that are separate from truck loading zones. We should do a better job of getting that information out as to where they are, and if we need more of them, but we can follow up on that.
Any further discussion on this item before we look for a motion? We already have a motion in a second. Hey, okay, well, yeah, Sean, I appreciate that. Well, I was just, and actually probably because the mayor is multitasking, so I was skimming again, I just want to bring, just to Councilman Abuser's point, I was just skimming in the privacy policy, that was developed back in December of 2024 and encourage members of the public interested in the privacy concerns to read that, because on page 2 of that policy, it's only 2 pages. There's some specificity there around prohibited use of data that we've already have in place, and I just want to make sure that's just brought up to date, the attention of the community, since we are already collecting this data manually, as was said before by Councilor Carpenter and our staff. And we take that very seriously, and that these protections are necessary for individuals' data. And I think we're doing a very sound and good job so far. And yes, of course, AI is continuing to evolve in municipalities and government use in general, but I think we have been thoughtful already around privacy. And I just want to make sure people see that it's posted on the agenda.
It's posted on our website at DPW for going forward as well.
Great, thank you for that, Chief. Okay, with that, we have a motion and a second, so I'm going to call the votes. So all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
I,
Any opposed, nay? Councilman Newbeezer, we're voting, so I think you indicated you're gonna vote no, I just want to give you a chance to be on the record. You can hear us. Just for the sake of the record, I'm going to just say that it is how do we do this, 401, so we did get a vote from Councilor Newbeezer?
Yes.
Is that how I do that?
Or yes, it's one abstention.
One abstention, great about that, yeah.
I guess abstention is not allowed. So I would say it's unanimous among those voting.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, but I would like to just make note, because I just want to respect Councilor Newbeezer's position, that in the notes, we just make a note that we in the discussion express opposition to this item, just be respectful of that. Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, that ends our deliberative agenda, and our last item is for information purposes related to fiscal year 27 general fund budget overview, led by our CAO, Catherine Shaw, that I will talk a little about strengths, she finished her note for the notes. A lot of hard work has gone into this presentation from weeks of work in good collaboration with all of our city department leadership and staff as we continue to get one step closer to full presentation of the fiscal year 27 budget. As she pulls it up even more, I will say our budget hearing nights start this week, budget nights start this week on Wednesday, where each department will go in more depth on each of their items. So they're following a similar template, so hopefully it'll be like last year, easier for people to follow in course of comparing budgets to departments to departments. So with that, there you go.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. This is actually our first budget night. I'm trying to sneak it in within the context of this meeting, simply so that we can get it all in within 2 weeks. And so this gives us the big picture overview. And with that, here we go. The roadmap for tonight, we'll talk briefly about the priorities and pressures as a little bit of a recap, then go through the assumptions for both revenues and expenses, the solutions, the effects on the municipal tax, and then next steps and discussion. So the priorities in this year's budget look very similar to last year's priorities. In fact, affordability, equity, and sustainability carried over right from last year. And then one thing that we added is the commitments that we have to our residents and employees. And we felt like that was especially important to mention based on some of the lessons learned we had from last year's budget. And how are those demonstrated? You can see them demonstrated by focusing on our core and essential services, with the modest raising of property taxes specifically to fund police and fire salaries, by eliminating vacant positions while keeping positions that employees have, and maintaining the city's gross receipts rates that have been in place for the past 2 years, and that is borne by both residents and visitors. Some of the pressures that we face, our budget is built on the assumption of 3% per year growth on personnel costs. But over the past 10 years, specifically since 2017, health insurance costs have nearly doubled. Also in the post-pandemic era, the cost of living adjustments have gone certainly in many cases beyond the 3% per year. And we don't have an ongoing revenue source for those. Also, we've talked about this before, but our grand list only grows at about a 1% per year rate. And that accounts for half of all of our revenue. Our other major revenue sources, like gross receipts and local option tax, are based on sales, and so those are subject to economic headwinds. We are currently bargaining with AFSCME, and that is the city's largest union, and so that means we have an assumption for COLA in next year's budget, but it is not locked in. And also we continue to live with uncertainty regarding things that are totally out of our control, like what Canadian tourists will and will not do, and the future of federal grants. Getting from that kind of 50,000 foot level to maybe more of a 20,000 foot level, we'll talk about the assumptions in building this budget. And this talks specifically about the big five revenue. These revenues account for about 70% of all the general fund revenue. And you can see on the left, each of these five, and then moving across how much percent of general fund revenue that accounts for. And then the assumptions. The property tax makes up the largest percentage. And that is a fairly easy calculation once we have the updated grand list number. I'm noting that we are proposing to use the full 5 cents of increased police and fire tax, as it was overwhelmingly approved by voters. The next one is property tax equivalents, also called pilots, sometimes called development fees. And those are all based on individual agreements. And so we go across the board, and in cases where inflation can be added, we do that. And then for gross receipts and local option tax, we look at how both of those have been performing over this past year and over the past couple of years, and we do some predictions. We work with Nancy Stetson, and you can see here, we do anticipate a little bit of growth there. And then the last one is franchise fees, and this is something that our utilities pay. And as you can see here, both BED and water make up the vast majority of this. And this is a 3.5% pass through, if you will, and it is to account for the utilities' use of city streets. And so again, this is based on what those utilities expect for their gross revenue for next year. Then we move on to the assumptions we have around expenses. Yeah, you want to ask a question now?
Yeah, just on gross receipts. Sure. The 9% that short-term rentals provide, a year ago, there had been a misinterpretation of that, and we were not, general fund was not getting all the 9%. I understand, and then we corrected that. How much differential was that going from what we used to keep up to the 9%?
So in this current year's budget, 7% is going to support the Housing Trust Fund, and 2% was still supporting the general fund. In FY 27's budget, all 9% will go to the housing trust fund.
It's like a 50,000.
That sounds about right. For expense assumptions, we, as I mentioned earlier, are retaining our current regular city employees. We are incorporating all of our required cost of living adjustments, and you can see here that 7% for fire and 4.75% for police. We do have a reasonable cost of living adjustment included for AFSCME. We are also including that same estimate that we have for AFSCME for our non-union employees. We don't have a policy, but we do have a practice of non-union employees receiving the same cost of living adjustment that AFSCME employees do. And then we have, and you'll see this throughout all the presentations, all departments have worked really hard to find what I have colloquially called the quarters in the couch. You know, trimming $1,000 from office supplies, $2,000 from training, whatever it is, you'll see we've worked really hard to trim anything we can while retaining the ability to provide the services that the city needs to. So let's talk a little bit about budget solutions. We have utilized all three of the prongs that we've talked about throughout this process: raising revenue, realizing strategic opportunities, and also right-sizing government. And we'll talk about them each in turn. The first one is raising revenue. Nothing on here has changed since I have talked to this group before, but for some of the counselors who maybe haven't heard this before, or the public, we will go through it quickly. We mentioned it's about $3 million of revenue by increasing the police and fire tax. About $1 million as we pursue enhanced collections of money that is already owed to the city. You can see the examples over on the right. And then we do have a little bit of one-time revenue that we are proposing to use that is made up from several different sources. And most notably, we did have about $1.2 million of excess revenue in our FY 25 audit. That goes to our unassigned fund balance, and we are proposing that we use half of that in FY 27 and keep half of it in the unassigned fund balance. As we talk about realizing strategic opportunities, many of these are mid or longer range topics that will continue to bear fruit in FY 27 and FY 28. But we are continuing to talk about the sale of city property, and you will see that listed here. And that would, of course, create both one-time money as well as adding to the grand list, which would bring property tax revenue to the budget on an ongoing basis. Then lastly, as we talk about the third solution, that is right-sizing government. And these first two we have also talked about, and we won't talk very much here. We will focus more on reducing government expenses. And that, if you look at all of these solutions, they total about $11.2 million. And I will say that at this point, we do have a balanced budget. We are not providing you all of the details of that here, but the budget is balanced. As we talk about reducing the government expenses, the considerations we used in deciding where to make those cuts were twofold, and we did that in conjunction with department heads and department staff. And that was looking at which departments were impacted over the last 2 years, and then which services are essential and which are core. And you can see the definitions of those words here. Essential services are those that are required by governing documents and that are foundational to local government. And then core services are those that are required by a legal or contractual agreement, but in theory, they could be renegotiated and we could get out of them if we needed to. Further into some of the details, what you will see as we go through the budgets by each department is that we are proposing eliminating or holding open 27 general fund positions. And this saves over $2 million. As I mentioned, 24 of the 27 positions are currently vacant to minimize the impact on people. 2 of those positions are recycle truck drivers, and of course, we've already discussed that both here and at City Council. Those positions are eligible to transfer to equivalent positions within the city. And then the last one making up the 27 is a position that is moving from full-time to part-time. Then another way to kind of slice this is to look at it from the union lens. And so you can see here, the majority are non-union. There's 10 AFSCME positions, 6 fire positions, and then 1 in our new union for police sergeants. And then the last way we'll look at this is 13 of the 27 positions are full eliminations. And then 13 are positions that will be held open. And so they will be reviewed again. Either we plan to for sure hire them in FY28, or we'll look at it again and make a decision. And then there's the 1 reduction of hours.
Just before you move off of this, because she's been very much deep in the weeds, these 2 slides are very important because they emphasize the fact that we have been able to do this part of the balancing of the budget without having to result on risk reduction of force of filled positions. That is very different than last year's difficult work we did on this budget. And I just really want to commend all of our departments and with leadership of our CIO shot on this and the finance team, because this reflects hours and hours of work. And I can't emphasize that enough of how difficult this was to do, to really be able to drill down and find vacancies to use rather than fill positions. So we understand the impact this had last year. We took that very seriously with lessons learned, which I think Catherine will mention a little bit more in a minute. But this is very minimal. And I want to emphasize the 2 recycled truck drivers, as Catherine just mentioned, are of course impacted on this from a larger conversation we had earlier in this year, calendar year, but they are eligible to transfer. And I think that is, this is quite remarkable. And we took this very seriously in building this budget. And I'm proud of this fact that we have very minimal impact on city staff this round.
Thank you.
Is that enough of an underline? That is, I just hope that's a big takeaway. If that's
Yeah.
one thing that the public takes from this presentation, that is pretty remarkable at this point.
Thank you for that. I think that is important. And just to emphasize something you said, Mayor, yes, we are applying lessons from last year, and this first one speaks to that. We have largely eliminated vacant instead of filled positions. And secondly, we do recognize that losing a vacant position can still have a meaningful impact on departments and on employees who are still here. And so we have a transition memo completed for every position that is going away. And so that outlines which tasks are ending and which are being, which tasks will be moved to other positions. And so that forward-looking work is something that did not happen last year, and so ensures that we will have much I hope, a much easier time in being able to smooth those bumps that can happen. Effects on the municipal tax. You can see here, and I note Sharon's comments. I will make sure that as we get another version of this presentation, it will, we can include some of those other fees she was talking about. But you can see here, the net effect on a $353,000 property, and that is the median assessed value. And next steps, you can see here the presentation schedule for the rest of this week and next week. And we do need to submit the full budget to the city council by June 15th. We should be able to do that well in advance of that deadline. And then the city council does need to approve it by June 30th. And with that, happy to take additional questions.
Catherine, questions or comments from the board? Council Person.
Back on the staffing and looking at the vacancies, that's obviously the way to go, but we have a rigid system in fashion. So I am hoping that department heads have had some latitude to move tasks around and or they've fully budgeted for that. And that relates back to my other comment about let's make sure we budget. So maybe you don't get 100% out of that position we just eliminated, but let's know that now rather than later. And again, my hope that department heads have enough latitude to move things if needed, because I wouldn't want us to get stuck. We're in a better place because we've got those vacant positions. But that maybe we need shifting stuff around.
Councilor Barlow?
Thank you again for these slides. I had a question about, there's no numbers on it, but it was on the slide concerning the sale of city property. This is the first time I've seen a specific property reference, 135 Brook Drive. I'm just wondering about the process by which you're choosing properties, what the process will be in terms of making those open for folks who want to participate in any purchase of city property, that sort of thing, because it seems like that'll all be important, and is that something that we will do during fiscal 27?
I just, thank you, if I may, Director Schott. Yes, so we utilize the planning department and Charles went through pieces of property that the city owned that would be, that didn't have any covenants around them, because some of what we own, it would be hard to sell or more complex or take time. Because perhaps they were purchased with grant funding or federal funding 30, 40, 50 years ago, and we'd have to unwind that. We found 2 properties that are sort of standalone, small. They'd be great for a duplex, a triplex, something like that. They're not land that the city would be able to utilize effectively in any sort of larger development project. They're not currently revenue generating, and they were deemed as quicker and easier to sell until we had them appraised.
Okay. This one I believe is a right of way, probably for the Route 127 build or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
They did mention it earlier too. It's not the first time.
Okay, I missed it.
He had a matrix of some sort that that criteria that
Yes.
Cara mentioned.
Yes.
We mentioned it some
Okay.
board.
Well, I apologize, I missed it. I'll look at that.
Yeah.
Or reach out to me and Charles if you have further questions.
And I'm just also mentioning that for the sake of the public, that we had brought that up before, and we're happy to bring that back and post it again, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Barlow. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I mean, I'll say something briefly. You know, first of all, let me acknowledge sort of appreciation for this presentation now, as well as the multiple presentations leading up to this point in time. I appreciate the administration hearing feedback from the last budget cycle, and the council wanted to get involved earlier on in the process. So gratitude from our role for that being the case. I suppose I will express some concern, and this isn't concern that I haven't mentioned previously, that as and I know we're not even at FY 27 yet, so I shudder to mention FY 28, right? But I do have some concern that with the budget that we're considering for FY 27, that we're going to be right back here in FY 28, that the baseline of the budget and the anticipated percentage increases that will come along with that automatically, just with cost of living adjustments, with the trends in terms of benefit costs, with our increasing debt service obligations, with our increasing retirement obligations, and so on, that we are going to find ourselves a year from now having another discussion around significant budget gap issues that we're going to have to address. And I'm mindful of the fact that even in the framework that we have here, that there are a number of one-time funds that we're putting forward to the end of addressing the FY 27 issue, including some that Councilor Barlow just mentioned there in terms of the sale of city property, but that's not the only item at issue here. And so I just want to express that let's get through the FY 27 budget cycle. But then sooner rather than later, I do think that if we really want to avoid being in a situation where we have another sizable budget gap in FY 28, that we're going to have to start thinking more creatively around even more expanded cost savings in the budget, which likely is eventually going to involve some cutbacks in city services. And unfortunately, I'm very grateful that we've landed in a position where the number of existing employees who are impacted is as low as it is. But I do think that if we want to ultimately address the chronic structural issue of these budget gaps that we keep running into, that the cutbacks in services and related positions is likely going to have to be larger. And I think that we need to have a broader discussion as a council about, is that the direction that we ultimately want to head in? Or, the alternative is that we're going to have to find some other sustainable revenue sources, and likely looking at another tax increase come FY 28. And so I just want to name that now, because I think pretty soon after we get through this FY 27 budget cycle, that the discussion is going to have to turn to FY 28 and thinking about what's that budget gap going to look like and how are we going to address it.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. I will just remind folks that we did do a budget gap presentation on March 23rd, where we spoke to a lot of what Councilor Travers is raising, including not only documenting what we've done so far in the first two budget cycles, my administration, but also adding to this one around how we've been narrowing this gap. And we've said since sort of day one of my administration that this isn't solvable in 1, 2, or even 3 budget cycles, that this is a gap that's been a structural issue for our city for a growing number of years, sort of hidden by one-time funds that didn't make it a big issue where we had to really look at the expense side of things. There are some scenarios and projection assumptions in that presentation people can look back at for the Board of Finance meeting again on March 23rd, with scenarios of how we project how we can start closing that with some certain assumptions, including keeping costs under control. In this budget that we are preparing to almost prepared to fully present to you, though, I want to just bring people back to the fact that in fiscal year 27, 13 of the 27 positions are being eliminated. So we are cutting in this upcoming year. They're vacant, which is the important headline here. But those will not continue in fiscal year 28. So we continue to structurally narrow very strategically, always an eye on core services and not cutting that. To make sure we're reducing our overhead essentially. So that's 13 positions that will not be in fiscal year 28 with whatever COLA and other things that would be building upon that. There's other things we need to do, of course, in this budget, and that's where I hope council can be partners around clarity of what is prioritized and what needs to be sunsetted, wound down, et cetera. Right size is the word I keep using because we do have to build a sustainable budget. And I'm hopeful that if we keep this disciplined approach and repeat what we've learned, that we can get to a place where our revenues have also increased to help us actually raise enough revenue where cuts aren't having to help continually be part of our budgeting cycle work. That Councilor Newbeezer. Councilor Newbeezer, are you there?
Yes, apologies all. Well, thank you so much. This is really helpful. I appreciate the information. I am really excited to hear that we are eliminating vacancies rather, and we're not going to see folks who are already employed with the city, particularly folks under the collective bargaining agreement, impacted. And I was really worried about that. So I appreciate that and want to thank you all for that work. I mean, you know, it feels like a little bit this discussion where we keep having the same discussion, which is, and I'm hopefully not being petty or whatever, but I just have to say it is one, you know, it is frustrating that the concern around some of these longstanding and by sort of comparison, much larger problematic fiscal practices are only coming up under this mayor. One, two, I do think that, you know, this is going to take time. I mean, the mayor just spoke to it a bit, but we're seeing those structural issues decrease substantially year over year over year, and we're on a good track, and I appreciate that work. And then we've got to just make a choice. I mean, we can't, you know, for example, vote against the property tax increase going to voters and asking them for more revenue, but then also say, you know, we got to name what the cuts are going to be if we're talking about more layoffs to balance the budget. And at the same time, you know, we're having this conversation about taxing folks who can afford it and the wealthiest residents. Like something's got to give in that equation. And in my view, what's got to give is folks who can afford it, folks who are doing phenomenally well, both in the city and statewide, need to pay more to fund critical and necessary public services. And so I think this conversation is reminding me the need to race toward taxing the richest in our city. I think this is a great, this whole conversation is a great argument for why that is so necessary and why it will be so necessary in coming fiscal years. So with that, I'll stop yapping and appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Counselor. This is an informational item. There is no vote on this particular item. So I'm mindful what time it is. So any further comments at this time, knowing that we will see more of each other later this week for individual department presentations and then a full, we haven't tracked which particular council meeting because just for the public to know, we will do the full presentation. What that entails is not only this, a version of this presentation to the full council, but it is the entirety of the budget, which is quite an undertaking for a finance game, like a line by line, so council can go through. Even in more detail than what we present from departments these over these next 2 weeks. So that will be either last meeting in May or early June. We haven't landed on it yet, so you'll have more time to dig in into even more details. So with that, anything else?
I wanted to piggyback a little bit on Councilor Traverse's comments, but more I hope July 2nd, we could really start digging. I still think there's more work to really look at what's really core and what it doesn't. And I don't feel like I have a huge, like a list of that. So I want us to have more discussion, and some of the things that may be less core to other individuals are things that are useful and helpful to the community, but maybe we as a city just simply can't support them any longer. So it doesn't make their value less. It just says municipal government with, at the minute, with property taxes our only revenue source, that might not be the right spot. And it could take a year to move some of those to maybe other partners. So I just want us to keep that out there and look at, are there things we can move to other partners if that makes sense?
Thank you, Councilor. Final comments. Seeing none, that is our last item on the agenda. So at 6:03 p.m. I will adjourn the board. Thank you.